The new Honda Pioneer 1000. Whoa, man, it's a beast with a best-in-class 999cc engine and the industry's only 6-speed, fully automatic dual-clutch transmission. This thing's real, it's big, and it's here. Check it out at pioneer1000.honda.com.
Pioneers are for drivers 16 years and older. For your safety, read the owner's manual. Wear a helmet and eye protection. Always wear your seatbelt and keep the side nets and doors closed.
Slam the door on FeePay. Forget everything you know about selling online because I'm here to tell you about a new and revolutionary way to buy and sell on the internet. BuySellMakeOffer.com is here to shake up the web. Tired of paying those outrageous fees? You'll never pay a fee with BuySellMakeOffer.com. For a monthly membership package starting at only $7.95, you can list and sell up to 50 items. That would cost you nearly $100 with the other guys. Go right now to BuySellMakeOffer.com and sign up today.
Hey Di, do you know that many people have no idea that the Carousel Mall is actually open?
What? Do you tell them that that's where Kcaa is located?
Of course, but there's more than just Kcaa here.
Oh, I know. It's a totally great place for a girls' outing. Here at the Carousel Mall, there's Mega Beauty Supply.
And it's huge.
Yeah, the biggest beauty supply store I've ever seen. And they have wigs and extensions.
Then there's Backstreet Beauty Salon and Daniel's Jewelers, a store, by the way, for girls and guys.
Yes, and Nail Fashions where they do waxing and eyelash extensions. There's Lisa's Threading. You know, Mark, eyebrow threading is a big thing nowadays.
I do know about Mr. Yu's.
Yes, when you're ready for lunch, it's Mr. Yu's Chinese restaurant.
Best of all, Mr. Yu's is right next to Kcaa.
Yes, all this located in the Carousel Mall, right off the 215, the 2nd and 3rd Street exit.
Come visit the Carousel Mall. We're open.
For more info, go to kcaaradio.com.
What have I learned so far? I've learned that dropping out of high school was my decision. But as a single mom, that decision affected more than just me. To set an example, I had to be the example. I found a free high school diploma program at Learn for Life that fits around my busy life. I have a team of teachers, tutors, and counselors that really care. I learn at my pace in an environment that is safe and comfortable. What have I learned so far? I've learned that I can change my life.
Are you 14 to 19 years old and looking for a free high school diploma program with flexible meeting times? This program allows you to keep your job or important family responsibilities while earning your high school diploma. If you've fallen behind on credits or dropped out of school completely, get back on track with free tutoring, a caring faculty, and one-on-one attention. For more information on how to reach your graduation goal, visit learnforlife.org. That's LEARN, the number 4, LIFE.org. Or enroll today by calling 877-360-LEARN. That's 877-360-LEARN.
Welcome to Smart Health Talk with your host, Elaine McFadden.
Take a walk on the wild side. Will the birds...
Redlands Blueprint and Commercial Printing Company has been serving the greater Inland Empire for over 60 years. For all of your printing needs, from full-color printing to high-speed copying and everything in between, go to Redlands Blueprint and Commercial Printing Company. Their staff is committed to your total satisfaction. Great service isn't just lip service at Redlands Blueprint and Commercial Printing Company. It's the way they do business year after year. Having trouble finding drafting supplies? Redlands Blueprint and Commercial Printing Company still carries a complete selection. Redlands Blueprint and Commercial Printing Company is rated high in customer satisfaction by Value Star, an independent rating company. For all of your personal or business printing, call Redlands Blueprint and Commercial Printing Company at 909-792-3478. That's 792-3478, or visit them on New York Street in Redlands off the I-10 and the Crosstown Freeway.
Welcome to Smart Health Talk with your host, Elaine McFadden.
Take a walk on the wild side.
This is Dick from Carpet Masters. Carpet Masters has been serving the Inland Empire for over 55 years. Carpet Masters uses extraction cleaning for your carpet because there's no better cleaning to remove the soil from your carpet. All of our furniture cleaning is done by hand in your home or in our plant. Carpet Masters also offers dry cleaning for fine furniture. Call Carpet Masters at 793-7215. That's 793-7215 for Carpet Masters.
Welcome to Smart Health Talk with your host, Elaine McFadden.
Take a walk on the wild side. Will the birds and the bees survive? Right before me, my newfound hippie side.
I'm a registered dietitian with a master's in public health and a big interest in keeping you healthy and feeling good and energetic and looking great too, because we all like to look our best, don't we? And I tell you, all those things are important because that's what life's all about, right? You want to enjoy life, you want to have energy, you don't want to be in the hospital, you don't want to be facing some life-threatening disease. And the problem is the threat of that is actually higher than it's ever been. It used to be that we had to worry about diseases that required antibiotics because we didn't have antibiotics. But now we have other diseases we have to worry about, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're living longer because of those antibiotics. And so we have more risk of things like heart disease, diabetes, but unfortunately with the diabetes end of it, and even the heart disease end of it, we are seeing the fact that our young people are more obese than they ever have been. Americans are more obese than they ever have been. And we're wondering, why is this? I was just looking at some pictures of some women in bathing suits from way back in probably the 30s or 40s, and I didn't see like one single bit of cellulite on them. Their bodies were perfectly proportioned. Their weight was their ideal weight. And, you know, I can't help but think about what I see on the street nowadays compared to those women. And I think a lot of it has to do with changes that we have. So have we been dead the whole time? Okay. Just wondering. Anyway, I hope everyone can hear me now. Apparently we had a little mic problem. Anyway, you're listening to Smart Health Talk. I'm your host, Elaine McFadden, just in case you didn't get that before. And we were just talking about your health and what it means to be healthy, what it means to have an ideal weight, to be energetic, and reducing your risk of the kind of diseases that kill you. And a lot of people don't realize, because they hear more about maybe other diseases than heart disease, but heart disease is our number one killer. And not only that, but diabetes is more rampant than ever before. We have people getting kidney failure, ending up in dialysis treatment, which at the tune of $500 a treatment 3 times a week comes out to about $6,000 a month just for the dialysis treatment. All of these things, obesity, insulin, diabetes, all these things, super expensive, very, very expensive. Burden on our healthcare system, our country, your life. And there's a lot of things that are contributing to this that you may not think about. There's been a lot of new things happening within our food system. And I have a guest on our show today, Dr. Michael Hansen from Consumers Union, Consumers Reports, who is the utmost expert on what has been introduced to our food system, what's in our food that you may not know about, because a lot of these things are microscopic, but there. And just because we know how we can get sick from a bacteria or a virus, these things are very, very small. We cannot see them, but they are there and they can kill us. And there are other things in our food that are there that we don't know about that have been introduced, started off in a lab, introduced into our food, and are compromising our nutrition, our health, the toxins that we're being exposed to. All of these things are, when we just eat food, are actually, all these additional things are happening in our body because we're introducing all these other outside toxins, chemicals, type of thing into our bodies that were never there before. And our bodies are kind of looking at it going, what the heck? What is this stuff? What do we do with it? And oh my gosh, it's going to hurt us. All these things are probably going on inside our body as we're just eating a regular meal. And some of the truth about what's on our food, in our food, is shocking. I just can't even believe it sometimes. But, the thing is, we got to face reality. And we can't turn away from what's going on here. That's the most important thing. We have to accept what's really happening, because it's denial that is our worst enemy. And we can't be denying what's going on. We have to start making smart choices. And that's why we have Smart Health Talk here, to help you make smart choices. And I want to welcome Dr. Michael Hansen to our show, because we're going to have a great conversation here, everybody. And I want you to stay tuned for this entire show. So, Dr. Hansen, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yay! All right, I got to tell you, I am a big fan of Dr. Hansen, because he brings us the kind of information that you don't get to hear just on the regular news. And this is the kind of information that can make the most difference in your life if you just knew it, what's going on. So, Dr. Hansen, you have been involved in a lot of things lately that, again, didn't make the evening news, but are things that are making a difference in what we're being exposed to, what's in our food. What do you think that you have been doing recently that has the biggest impact, and in your mind was the most important?
I actually don't know how to answer that question. But what I'd say is, I think one thing that is important is this past Friday was the end of this comment period, where the Food and Drug Administration has asked for comments on what's called a consolidated framework. It's basically the government asking for public comment on how we regulate products of biotechnology. So they held, about 2 weeks ago, they held a public meeting where people could come up and testify, and then this comment period was over this past Friday. So there were quite a number of organizations throughout the U.S. Submitted comments, and I think they were able to get over 100,000 citizens to sign on to these comments, and this was basically telling the agencies that the consolidated framework is broken, and that the way we regulate products of biotechnology or products of genetic engineering is insufficient, and that adequate regulations are needed for these products. So I think that's an important thing. Another issue that's been very high is Consumer Reports for the past 2 months has been doing these articles on antibiotic resistance. So there was one article on the problems with antibiotics in medicine, then this article on beef, and there'll be a new article coming out next month, which will, I believe, hit the newsstand, or at least the article in it will be, the embargo will be lifted, and that's either tomorrow morning or Thursday morning.
Oh,
so
well,
it's those,
hey,
those
that's
two
big
issues,
news.
and that actually has to do with antibiotic resistance and trying to get some action on getting the agencies to take some action on the issue of antibiotic use in agriculture. So those are the sort of two big things, but I guess the genetic engineering thing is pretty large, because that's the agencies sort of recognizing they have a problem, and they were asking for public comment.
So how does that affect, us? I mean, they're saying that there's, the way that we regulate everything is not a good system. Can you, can you give us kind of in layman's terms, the way the system is now?
Right. Here's actually what the problem is. Right now, there's a number of genetically engineered plants on the market. So if we look at our major crops, for example, corn is 93% is engineered. Soybeans, it's 94%. Canola is over 90%. And sugar beets are almost 99% engineered. Those crops have not been adequately tested for safety, for either environmental safety or for potential human safety before they're allowed on the market. There's also this new wave of genetic engineering happening. They have these new techniques, the so-called gene editing techniques. I don't know if any folks in your audience have heard about the term CRISPR, and that's with this new gene editing technique. They've actually literally been able to go in and change the DNA of a they've done it with the human, or at least the Chinese did it with the human embryo at very early stages. This new form of genetic engineering, which is increasingly being used on plants, these gene editing techniques, as they're called, they're actually unregulated by the USDA because they don't meet the definition of genetic engineering. So the potential problem is we're growing these food products that have not been adequately tested for safety. As the technology advances, there can be more and more plants, and you can actually engineer animals too. We have a fish and a pig that are waiting in the wings to be approved. There's next year in New York, they're going to be releasing some genetically engineered insects for field trials, these engineered moths, and they're trying to release engineered mosquitoes down in the Florida Keys. So those raise both, as I said, environmental and human safety issues. With the new forms of genetic engineering, they can actually manipulate and engineer more organisms. And if we don't have proper assessments in place, that's just more potential hazard for things to come on the market. And so far, what we've seen with genetic engineering is, even though this technology has been sold to us as that it would help cure diseases, we would be able to have crops that would be resistant to disease, would yield more, could potentially fix their own nitrogen, be more nutritious, et cetera, but the reality is we basically produce, this technology has been used to produce crops that resist. The main trait is actually resistance to herbicides, and herbicides are chemicals that are used to kill weeds, and in particular it's this Roundup, which is the herbicide is called glyphosate. And so most of the crops have been engineered to have this trait in it. As I said, for example, for the corn, of the 93% of the corn acreage that's engineered, 89% of that has the herbicide tolerant trait in it, virtually all Roundup resistance. The soybeans that are engineered, the 94%, that's all Roundup resistance. The canola, that's over 90%, that's herbicide tolerance. Most of that's Roundup resistance. For the sugar beets, the 99% that are engineered, that's all Roundup resistance. And that's actually led to a dramatic increase in the use of the herbicide glyphosate, which has caused environmental problems and potentially caused human health problems as well.
And
so
the World Health Organization came out and said it was actually probably causes cancer.
Yes, actually, you're right. In April of this year, a division of the World Health Organization called IARC, and that stands for the International Agency for the Research on Cancer. Yes, they came out and said glyphosate is what's called a class 2A, which is a probable human carcinogen, and but that doesn't tell you how strong the risk is. It's just the likelihood that it does cause human cancer.
Well, that's enough for me.
So it has, of course, gone against. Yes, but actually, what's happened is since then we've had both the European Union, the European Food Standards Organization, just late last week came out and said that it looks like glyphosate is perfectly fine. They agree with this German. Yes, they agree with the German reassessment that there's no risk here. Although if you actually read the EFSA response carefully, what they're saying is, well, there's no evidence that glyphosate, which is the active ingredient, is probably safe. But they said they didn't have data, or the company didn't submit sufficient data on the potential toxicity of the other things that make up the actual herbicide that's used. Because the product that's actually sprayed in the field has what are called the active ingredients, and those are the ones that are deliberately put in there to do a given function, in this case, to kill weeds. Now, what the other things that are in there can be things that, for example, helps the herbicide to stick to the plant or to penetrate into the plant more readily, or these other functions. Those, unfortunately, legally are termed inert ingredients. But the term inert, which people think means doesn't have any...
misleading.
Doesn't have any impact, is not true. All it means legally is that those compounds are not deliberately added for the given function, that is this herbicidal function.
So what are those inert ingredients, Dr. Hansen? Right. What are they?
Well,
they're secret.
Yes, they are. But actually, a number of them are known. One that is a problem is this surfactant, and that's something that sort of helps the herbicide to stick to the leaves of the plant. That's a substance called POEA, and there's evidence that that's toxic. And actually, part of the reason that we have a difference between what the regulatory agencies say, like EFSA and the Germans and even the US EPA, and what IARC said, is IARC actually looks at all the data, all the studies that are on glyphosate. So that also includes the studies that are done on the formulated product as it's used in the real world, right?
Right. So they're looking at that whole Roundup product, not just that one active ingredient. Now, I want to know why aren't all these other people looking at? Because those inert ingredients are what really scares me.
Yes, but you to put this in its proper context, you have to understand the history of it. What the issue was when you look at pesticides is when the Environmental Protection Agency was set up in 1972, they did decide that we're going to look at all pesticides and try to come up and set some kind of safe level, try to set some safe tolerance level. Now, when the agency was formed in 1972, they took that task on. The problem that they encountered is when they looked at it, they said at the time, there's 35,000 pesticide products on the market. And what the government said is that's too many. We can't look at the safety of 35,000 products one by one. That'll take forever. So what they said is, given limited resources and because we can't do everything, that's too many. But the active ingredients, the main sort of pesticide or chemical or herbicide in this case, the active ingredients, there's only about 600 of those. And so the EPA made a decision in 1972, we're going to look at the safety of active ingredients, not of the formulated products. So that means they'd only have 600 to go through rather than 35,000. And this was supposed to do all 600 active ingredients that was supposed to take 7 years. They said this would be done in 7 years. So it, would have been 1979, 1980. However, decades later,
later.
Yes, we've only done the first go-round of looking at these pesticides. So when you look at it, it does make sense for why the agency, when they first started to look at this, decided we're going to look at active ingredients, right? But the formulated product, which is the real thing, that can have all sorts of things in it. And in fact, there's been a huge fight in the U.S. over the years to get those inert ingredients made public. That still hasn't happened, but through lawsuits and action taken against EPA, they were able to force them to come out and at least classify them in these broad classes, A, B, C, and D. And one class was stuff that was clearly known to be toxic, and those all had to be removed. But as it turned out, there were things that were considered inert ingredients that were like chlorinated rubber, DDT, arsenic, all these things. They were literally, yes.
So slipping that in there under this inert ingredient.
No. It can be a contaminant. A perfect example is there was a pesticide being used in the 70s and 80s, and I think it's still on the market, called Kcaa. And it's an insecticide and a miticide. So you spray it against like mites. Well, it's in the same family. It's an organochlorine. And it turns out when you manufacture it, a side reaction or a contaminant during the manufacture is DDT. Now, what was happening at the time is DDT was outlawed in 1972. But what they started noticing in the late 80s and early 90s is the environmentals and DDT is something that is environmentally persistent because it's, bioaccumulates. It, concentrates in fat. And what they noticed is all of a sudden the background levels of DDT in California started to increase. And that didn't make any sense since it had been banned in the 70s, and this was happening like in the 90s and the late 80s and 90s. And what they realized was this Kcaa actually had a significant amount of contamination with DDT. But since that was not being deliberately added in there to kill the insects, it was considered just to be a, quote, inert ingredient. So the clear classes of things that are clearly hazardous, those were yanked from pesticides sometime in the 90s. But there's still hundreds of things that could be in there, and many of them you just don't know what the safety is. And also, there's the problem with chemical mixtures, because there actually have been studies done where they take a herbicide that you can buy at a lawn and garden store, which is a mixture of 2,4-D and maybe dicamba, and they can actually do experiments in the lab and show that that's more toxic than if you just look at the active ingredient by itself.
Well, isn't that Endless Duo?
Well, yes, that's an example of Endless Duo is, yes, that's a combination. That's glyphosate and 2,4-D.
And that's approved for use for next spring.
That's correct. But I think the point to back up is that the EPA and the regulatory agencies, they only look at active ingredients. So that means they're asking a very narrow question. Does this active ingredient cause cancer or some kind of adverse health effect? Well, if you have a study on the product that's actually used by people, that is the formulated product, you can't tell if you see toxicity there. You can't say that it's due just to that active ingredient. In fact, you don't know what it is in there that might be causing it, unless you, of course, know the mechanism of action and exactly what it's doing, but usually you don't.
And then what about this, Dr. Hansen? Then, I've went to the actual, government websites when I type in, like how much is in, how many pesticides are on this apple or how many pesticides are on this potato. And, we're talking like 50 pesticides on one apple, 35 on a potato with the skin on it. And
well, but those are very extreme numbers. Very few individual pieces of produce, like an individual apple, will have that many.
Okay.
But in terms of having multiple residues, yes. Yes, that can easily happen. So there is the issue of these additive effects, right? And so part of the problem that the regulatory agencies, they only look at the active ingredient, they don't look at the full product. So that means there's a lot of studies they ignore, and most of the studies on the active ingredients have actually been done by the companies themselves.
And so you're saying that that's really what we should be upset about, are these kind of, these other ingredients that are in there, but they don't have to tell us what they are. We have no clue, but we do have some clue, and that we have found that there have been things that have created chemicals like DDT. And
right, but what I think the point about this is that the products that are actually on the market, those are what need to be tested for safety, right? Just because you say a given active ingredient is fine, that's not what people are exposed to. They're exposed to a formulated product. And all I'm saying is that those have not been adequately tested, much less combinations of them.
Well, I guess the question that I was really asking before is that we know that there can be multiple pesticides sprayed on a fruit or vegetable during its growing period. And that during, when you're spraying these different pesticides with these different inert ingredients, that the combination of those inert ingredients, even from one to the other pesticide, are creating a new toxin.
They could interact in ways to enhance the toxicity. They could act in a synergistic fashion so that the toxicity of the whole is greater than what you would normally expect just by adding the individual toxicities together. And I should point out, Consumer Reports earlier this year actually did a report where we used USDA's data, because they do test for about 150, 160 different pesticides, and they have tested large numbers of fruits and vegetables, both domestic and imported, and we were able to determine all this individual data from their database. So that would literally be how many apples and how many residues they had on them and the actual levels. So we then developed a model, a sort of relative dietary risk model, to look at not only the number of pesticide residues that were on, but their levels they were there and the potential toxicities, all into this overall score. And when you crunch all the numbers, what you see is there are often very large differences, or there are significant differences between groups. And we had this actually graphic in the article and online that you could go, and if you looked, for example, at apples, you could look and see whether it was recommended to buy domestic or imported, because you would see that there was a difference in this dietary risk index. So we actually cranked all those data from the government in this useful fashion to help people buy in a more healthful fashion. That is, if they wanted, they could use this to buy fruits and vegetables that would be more likely to have fewer pesticide residues or to have a lower dietary risk. Now, the one problem with that study is, since that was based on all this government data, is the data is only good as what you're testing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, since glyphosate has considered to be, quote, relatively non-toxic, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and nobody ever bothered to ask for it to be part of this. That's called the PDP, the Pesticide Data Program. So it hasn't been. So we don't have data, at least from the United States, on residues of glyphosates in the various foods we eat. There actually has been some data from Europe, because they have looked at that, but that's a different situation.
Okay, well,
so, that's there.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely, like to get into this a lot more, but I think the antibiotic antibiotic resistance information that you guys are publishing right now with another new part 3 coming out. This is something that is impacting all of us, and if we get sick,
and there's actually things going on both at the national and international level, because the CDC this week, this is Antibiotic Awareness Week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they're trying to raise awareness in both the medical field and in the food area. And that was announced, I believe, yesterday. And one of a large number of organizations that is partnering with CDC on this is actually Consumers Union and Consumer Reports. And if this were happening tomorrow, I could tell you more about the exact details. The other thing that's going to happen tomorrow, or I believe it's Thursday, is there's going to be an announcement at the international level, because Consumers International, which is a global network of consumer organizations, 220 members in 115 countries, they meet once every 4 years, and there will be a meeting starting either tomorrow or Thursday in Brasilia, and there's going to be an announcement there about, I'll just say, a global campaign that has to do with antibiotics. I can't.
Well, do you think that there's been, between that 4 years since their last meeting, have like some really striking changes happened?
Well, on the antibiotic area, everybody realizes this is a global problem. Even within the last year, both the World Health Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, says this is, of critical human importance. Now we have presidential panels and other ones saying it here in the United States. But the problem is one of the large problems with the resistance is just the total amount of antibiotics that are being used. And when you look at that, 80% of all antibiotics that are prescribed in the U.S. are actually used in animal agriculture and not human medicine. And so there is a lot of misuse and overuse and abuse in animal agriculture. And one thing that has happened that I think is positive is this law was passed in California and finally signed by the governor there last month. And that law would be it's the first in the nation. The way it's written, the way we read it, it would not only ban the use of antibiotics for growth promotion, but more importantly for disease prevention, because that's one of the large loopholes and is one of the main reasons that we have large amounts of antibiotics being used in animal agriculture.
Okay, that growth promotion thing, I just want to take a minute for that, because when I first started off the show, I was talking about obesity and how we're gaining weight. And I would like to tie it in both on how those are impacting us and our obesity, but also the pesticide thing that you were talking about as far as it being stored in fat, because Dr. Stephanie Senev, she hypothesized that there was this belly fat and all this extra fat that we're seeing on people's bodies could actually, all these pesticides could be stimulating the formation of fat, because we have so many toxins in our body that our body sticks it in fat as kind of a way to keep...
but that's only for compounds that are fat soluble. In terms of pesticides, what we're really talking about there...
Yeah, she was talking about the pesticides in the meat fat, in the beef saturated fat and that kind of thing.
Right, but the pesticides that you're going to find in fats, the stuff that accumulates, is primarily the organochlorines. And most of those really have been taken off the market. What I would point out, though, is there actually has been a good study within the last 5 years that actually has shown if you give mice low levels of antibiotics, sort of analogous to what they would do with growth promotion, it changes the microbiome, and those mice actually, not only do they put on weight, but the weight they put on is more fat. So when you look at the fat ratio on mice that are on low levels of antibiotics versus ones that aren't, they're also more have a higher fat ratio.
And isn't glyphosate that you said is in pretty much all these crops? Isn't that an antibiotic as well?
Well, technically, yes, it does kill bacteria, but the real issue there is we don't know what the concentrations would be in the gut, because what you'd really want to know are what are the concentrations that are actually on the food that gets eaten.
And what about antibiotics in meat? When we eat meat, are we getting exposed to antibiotics?
Well, what the issue is there's probably not very much of a residue of the antibiotics in the meat, but if they have been raised from animals that have been treated with antibiotics, what you've done is you've selected for resistance. So there not only could be these resistant pathogens, but think of it as the resistance factor, because that can sort of move independently of the bacteria, right? So that if there's an E. coli that is resistant to, say, ampicillin, right, that resistance factor can move from the E. coli and jump into a salmonella or a campylobacter or an enterococcus, and they will now become resistant. So these resistance factors, which are being shed by bacteria, can be a huge problem. So even if there's no residue of the antibiotic there can be a lot of resistance factors. So when you eat that meat, those resistance factors could be transferred either from benign bacteria or other bacteria into potentially pathogenic ones.
Is that something like how vaccines work?
No, vaccines trigger an immune response, but the problem with these use of antibiotics is not so much it's part of the residues, but it does select for multiple antibiotic-resistant bacteria. We've actually published, and in our last, it was one of these articles on the on this antibiotic series. It was the one on beef that was published last month. We were able to demonstrate from our own testing, showing that if you look at and we tested both, looked for pathogens in the meat, but also other bacteria that are indicative of, fecal contamination, what are called indicator organisms like enterococcus. And when we looked at all those bacteria, we didn't find any pathogens in the hamburger, right? So that's good news. But when you looked at the bacteria and then you looked at the resistance in those bacteria to antibiotics, it turns out the meat that was either organic or labeled as, raised without antibiotics, there was significantly lower levels of multiple antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And
I'm glad to hear that, since that's what I eat.
Yeah, so that's some of our data showing that, and there are other studies which have demonstrated
it's good to choose
that
organic.
as well. Yes, and so that's why we're seeing all these, McDonald's has pledged to go antibiotic-free. The most recent one is Subway. And the way Subway's talking is they're going to get rid of all antibiotics, not just the ones important for human medicine, but even all of them, even the ionophores and everything.
Oh, well, that's good.
So that they will ultimately move to only be selling animal protein from animals that have never been fed or have never been exposed to antibiotics. Now, that does not mean that if an animal gets sick, you don't treat it. What it means is you can still treat a sick animal, but it can no longer be sold as, either organic or antibiotic.
Do you think that all that antibiotic resistance was kind of part of the problem of the avian flu and all of the pigs getting sick and millions?
I think part of the problem with the avian flu is the industrial food animal production system. The fact that you have these heavily concentrated sort of poultry systems. Because if you look at some studies, right, when they talk about, wild birds, have the avian flu in it, and have that. When they've looked at that more carefully, what they've found is you can go into some areas, and if you look in cities, right, you don't find birds that or the level of avian flu is incredibly low. When you look at the birds that are near the slaughter plants or the poultry facilities, they do tend to have it.
And actually, the pig virus that was going around, that could transfer to humans because they had warnings not to go to like the county fair and go into.
Well, but part of
visit the pigs.
The main reason we're using these huge amounts of antibiotics isn't just for growth promotion. It's for this disease prevention, and it's basically to facilitate an industrial system where you pack lots of animals together in confined spaces under filthy conditions. And so sometimes that's what all these chemicals are being used to sort of substitute for better hygiene and better production systems. So what's curious is, even though the FDA is moving at a glacial pace and we have some states now taking action, it's interesting to see that the market is starting to take action, which shows that that's what consumers really want.
Yeah, we're demanding it.
Well, that's exactly correct. And that's why we put out, along with NRDC and other groups, last month, this report card for the various for the various restaurant chains as to whether they did or did not have policies on reducing the amount of antibiotics used and whether they were going to go antibiotic free. And I think in part as a response to that short report and a report card showing many of the chains getting enough, that Subway now comes out with this strong.
No, I'm just grateful for you guys. I'm grateful for the Consumers Union and all the work that you guys do there.
There's also a coalition of folks working on this outside the city as well.
Absolutely, yes. But you guys come out with some really good reports. And I would also like to ask about a couple of questions like this. Isn't just true for chickens and birds and pigs and cows. It's also for fish. And then also...
Oh, absolutely. Aquaculture is actually really important when we look at the whole issue of antibiotics and other things, particularly with imported fish.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, because the aquaculture of
unregulated
fish imports, yes, we have, take shrimp, for example. I believe 75 to 80% of the shrimp is imported, and a large percentage of that comes from Asia. And if we look at places like China and Vietnam, the production systems there are...
And that goes into our ocean, and it's affecting even our ocean as a whole.
That's a different issue. That's the issue of net pens and salmon farming. And yes, that poses a lot of risk.
In other words, I'm just trying to say that there, the repercussions of these type of practices, they keep going. It doesn't just end.
That's correct. And they don't have to, because I would point out, if we look at Alaska, unlike Canada, unlike Norway, unlike these other countries, Alaska never allowed, with their salmon, they never allowed salmon farming. You cannot farm salmon in the sea or put these net pens out. They only harvest wild stock, and they've actually managed their stocks so that the salmon fisheries in Alaska are actually doing really well.
Yeah, whereas that's my number one recommendation.
Right, where these other salmon fisheries, where they have these, where they're doing aquaculture with these large net pens, they have all sorts of problems because
lots
they
of
put
viruses
together. So they'll have sea lice, and they have to give them all sorts of chemicals, and then those fish sometimes get out, and that causes genetic pollution with the wild salmon. So it's...
And then also the transfer, because we recently had a salmonella outbreak from the cucumbers. Now, what I'm wondering is we're talking about factory farming animals, and I've seen pictures where, the excrement from the animals, they put it in like some big pool, and then, we can have excess rain or different kinds of things like that. It gets into the river. Can some of these antibiotic resistant bacteria then end up on our fruits and vegetables because they go down river and then water is then sprayed on the fields?
If that's actually used, yes. There's been work done, for example, in Colorado, very interesting work, where they looked upstream and downstream from large cattle facilities, right? Mm-hmm. And upstream, which is in the more pristine areas, they can then look for the level of resistance, these resistance factors like resistance to tetracycline and other thing in the sediments of the river. And what they do is they can show over 1,000-fold differences between upstream and downstream. Yep.
That's really scary because people are dying from eating a friggin' cucumber. And, I'm like, well, where the heck is this stuff coming from? And, I'm thinking the factory farms. So, thank you for that information.
Well, they should be able to have better tracing with some of this because the technology's all there if they wanted to use it.
And how dangerous is this from like a mother and breastfeeding, transferring some of the... Well,
the pathogens are not going to be so much of a problem there. The breastfeeding issue, part of the slightly tricky sort of trade-off there is, given all the exposure people have, there's individuals probably have this body burden. There have been these studies of you can look, and in the average person, they can usually find dozens of different, chemical compounds that have been found in the environment or food or other things we put on or in our bodies.
Yeah, so it's my recommendation that if you want to have a baby, really start, going on a toxin-free diet even before you get pregnant, and even for a year ahead of time, just to even prepare to get pregnant, and then, stick with it for, at least through like breastfeeding and all that. It would be my recommendation, at least from everything that I've read. So I think that's a pretty big deal. Now, I also wanted to, this, again, this antibiotic resistance, it's just to me like so scary because the thought of, you get sick and you have something that you should be able to take an antibiotic and you would be fine. And I know that we've had like antibiotic resistant gonorrhea, which no one wants to talk about. It's so, it's not a very nice subject, but I think
or things that people don't realize are food related. So for example, there's a connection that they've now been able, since there have been scientists who can completely sequence since the technology is there is to look at the entire DNA sequence of a bacteria. That way you can tell exactly where it came from. So using this methodology, they've been able to show that bacteria that are on food that people eat can also end up causing, for example, UTIs, urinary tract infections.
Oh, so that may be where it's coming from. You didn't even know it.
Yes, some of the foodborne, and the way they were able to show it is if you have this sophisticated, well, it's actually cheap now, but if you can just sequence the bacteria you find, since bacteria reproduce asexually, you can usually look at the difference in the genetic material between two bacteria and sort of tell how closely related they are. So that means if you find the same bacteria on like on a salad or a piece of meat, and then somebody in a hospital who has a urinary tract infection, if they see the exact same, virtually the identical sequence, then you know that the food had to have caused that. Now, because there'd be no way for that organism to get to those two places.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I'd like to fit in a couple other things if we can. First of all, I don't know if you have the same conclusions as I do as far as like recommendations, because to me, from everything I've seen, it seems like organic is always the best choice. And also, I think what's something that another study that Consumers Union did that reinforces that is people are kind of tricked into buying these natural products, where you guys did a bunch of testing and found, a lot of GMOs because people are trying to avoid GMOs, and they're thinking, oh, if I buy a natural product, then that's not going to have GMOs in that. And your testing proved quite the opposite.
Yes, and on the natural issue, we also petitioned the FDA to get rid of the term. And just ironically, last week the FDA has now come out, and there's going to be a 90-day comment period, but they're asking for comments from the public on what the definition of natural is. Should it include, genetic GMOs, as you call them, or genetically engineered crops, should they be considered natural?
No.
Should high fructose corn syrup be considered natural?
No.
Well, the FDA is going to be taking comments in those areas, and they noted in their notification that they were putting this comment out. One of the reasons they stated or they noted was our citizen petition. So yes, there's the problem of labels like natural that don't mean much. I would say for meat, though, the complete grass-fed, because animals that are 100% certified grass-fed, those will have higher omega-3s, alpha tocopherols.
And those help with heart disease, which I mentioned in the beginning of the show is the number one killer.
Those are all wonderful, but unfortunately, organic, you can have an organic meat, and it can be from an animal that has been fed a bunch of organic grain. When for the meat, it looks like the real issue there is animals that are completely grass-fed.
And that's the gold standard.
Right, and that would make sense because if you think about it, cows have been evolved to eat grass.
Something that made me really mad is the, commercials. I really, a lot of these commercials trick people, and I really, this one commercial that's bugging the heck out of me is this Yoplait commercial where the guy goes up and he's like in the middle of a big grass field pasture with one cow, and he's like, oh, I really like your yogurt. It's really tasty. And I just feel like that's really tricking people, making them think that, that yogurt is from grass-fed cow.
Yeah, but on the other hand, animal agriculture often gets a bad rap because they say it's causes all these greenhouse gases. That's true, but that's again for these industrial animal feed operations, because you can show that if you just do this pasture grazing, just graze them on pasture, those systems, you can actually put a lot more carbon dioxide and other things back into the soil.
And it's really agriculture in general that's causing the CO2. 30% of the CO2 is...
There's this regenerative form of agriculture where the animals are part of the system, so you actually get very high-quality meat, and you can literally be putting a lot more carbon into the
I love it.
So
that's a great way to end.
And that's actually one potential answer to the how to have a positive impact on the climate change.
Well,
through
changing
the way we grow things.
Well, we have to wrap it up now, but I love what you just said, and that's so important. Thank you so much, Dr. Hansen, and we'll be looking for that new study coming out in the next couple of days on antibiotic resistance. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and find all this on smarthealthtalk.com, everyone, and tune in again next Tuesday. Thanks a lot for joining us. Bye.
Listening to KCAA Loma Linda at 106.5 FM, K293CF Moreno Valley.
I've exposed in dreams from my real father, his real biological father, who was his ideological mentor throughout his life, was the radical communist Frank Marshall Davis. He was anti-white, anti-American, pro-Soviet. Obama's pro-Russian policies. Everything can be tied to Frank Marshall Davis. I encourage everyone to look at it. As I said, Ben Carson does deserve scrutiny, but the media should have gone out to Hawaii like I did twice and looked into Obama's background,